welcome back. So in the previous video I said we were going to talk about strings and regular expressions. So now we're going to split this video in two because there's a lot to strings. So also before I start, please subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos and give it a thumbs up if you like it at the end. Thank you. So firstly, I want to say that nearly all the documentation is right here within Oracle. So you can see, and it's important also to get the latest because they improve all the time. So here, if I type in string java.lang, it will come up with Java Standard Edition 9 or 11 or any list of other ones, and Oracle is basically where you get your information from. So we're going to just take a brief look at this. We're not going to go into too much detail, but I want to make sure that people understand how to read some of the documentation because it will make sense later. So java.lang.object then and java.lang.string. So as we know, string is part of the java.lang package being a group of classes within the Java API application programming interface that we already have within the Java development kit, the JDK, and the version of the Java development kit depends on what you download for your environment. So here we have our public final class string, public being our access modifier, so it's open to, you can use it in multiple classes across different multiple classes. Final, you cannot change it, and so and class string. It extends object because every class within the java.lang implicitly extends object. And it implements these, which we only briefly spoke about, but we'll come to that later on as well. And strings are constant, their values they're immutable is what it's called. So when they cannot be changed after they're created, it's called immutable. So we're going to look at the string class. As we know, there are primitive types and reference types, and string is a reference type. It's referring to an object, which is the string.class. Within each of these then, it's also important to know that a string being a sequence of characters treated as a single unit. So we have ABC here within the double quotation marks. It's treated as a single unit, but it's also equivalent to this character array ABC. And this is where it becomes important because a string is an object of class string. And then we have string literals stored in memory as string objects. So each of these then string literals may be assigned to a string reference. So we have here, this would be a string reference ABC, but we also have what it does in the background, which is important to know, is that it's part of the Unicode here. So I have brought up this as well, also from the Oracle Java.Standard Edition tutorial. So if you're not familiar with Unicode, I will do a video on it. If you want a video on it, please comment below and we can talk more about it because it's one of the most important things with learning anything to do with computers. So Unicode is the computing industry standard designed to consistently and uniquely encode characters used in written languages throughout the world. So for instance, everything within the lower level of the computer, which I've only mentioned I think once within these tutorials, so that they're all converted eventually to ones and zeros, but there are certain levels of conversion along the way. So when a specification for the Java language was created, then the Unicode standard was accepted and the char primitive, which is primitive type, was defined as a 16-bit data type with characters in a hexadecimal range from this to this. So you can actually look up an entire Unicode chart and you can see that the value of the Latin character A is 0 by 0041. And with that then you can see everything is represented here with our, when I go down to our Latin characters. So here's our Unicode for A, B, C. So the computer needs to interpret in the background how it's going to read these things and how it's also stored in memory, which we'll come to in a second. So now we have in our Eclipse program, then I have made a few small programs to demonstrate certain things. So we have here a character array, which we haven't really spoke about character arrays, but obviously we know that char is a primitive type, not a reference type, but string is a reference type, which starts with a capital S. So we have a character char array, and I've just put in an iterator list of hello world within it, with one empty here as well. So string, then I have created a new string object, say hello, another hello world, and then I use the string constructors. If you're not sure about constructors yet, please check the constructors video. I will link it in the channel as well. And here we have created multiple new string objects. So we've got an empty one. We have one that passes through the value of string from the previous one and assigns it to string 2. We also pass through the character array and assign it to string 3, and then we have another one, which is the character array, and then this is important because we can change these values later on. So here we reference a particular position and then how many that we use. So if I write this out again, you can see what I mean. So if I write it here, it will show that it's going to need here. So if I open this first, it should, and if I was to say 3 and 3, we will use this and then print out 5. So I've printed them out separately so that it's easier to read for you, but I would probably just normally write it all in one long statement. So if we just print it to the console, you can see that string, which is this one here, is printed first, which is another hello world. String 1 then is here, which is our placeholder, which is our %s, and a new line for %n is empty. String 2 then is referring to string, so that's another hello world. String 3 then is referring to the character array, so it just takes all of the individual characters within char and looks at it as a sequence of characters treated as a single unit. So that is now treated as a single unit. And then world is printed here. So this is where the 6 and the 5 come in. So if I have the different ways of counting array, remember? So I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it's 0-based counting in the array, of course. And then we have 3, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, which is going to refer to the L, and it prints out 2. So world is 5 characters. So that's pretty straightforward. We're going to go on to the next one now. I hope that's pretty understandable. Obviously, I use the printf because it's formatted, and we use a placeholder as well. Now we're going to go to string miscellaneous. So the string miscellaneous is now creating a new string called hello. And we have a character array of length 5, and then we print out first the original string, which is hello, then we print out the length. So similar to arrays in that you can get the length of a string using the .length method. So if I type here string dot, you can see how many things are available. So in Eclipse, it doesn't show you exactly that it's a method, but in IntelliJ and another integrated development environment IDE, you can see an M, and it's usually represented as a method, then you can see. So within that here, when we go back to our string class in our documentation, we can go down here to firstly the constructors which we've used. So string being, this is a new string, but it's an empty one. And we used character values to put into it, a character array, and then we use the offset, which is the starting point. So that's an important word to remember. Offset means starting point, and then the count, so how many characters that we show. So in the methods then, we are today going to look at a compareTo, and we are also going to look at equalsIgnoreCase, and a few others, but this is where you get your documentation. So length being returns the length of this string. So if I click on length, it will show you that it's a public int method, returns the length of the string, and the length of is equal to the number of code units in the string, length in interface char sequence, and then it returns the length of the sequence of characters represented by this object. You can also use isEmpty and char at. IsEmpty is also used within arrays, which is also useful. So now if I go back to my Eclipse program, I have now a for statement here. I'm just going to indent my code. So we have our int count string.length, so it's going to be -1 because our length is not the same as our index. Remember this before, from before. So that's also important because it's 0, 1, but our length is a different number. So and then it just prints out the character at. So we have our int, it returns an integer, returns the char value. However, int index passes through it, but returns the char value for it. And then we have get characters. So I'm going to also, there's offset written in this as well. So if I use the get character chars, get chars, and open it up, it should, nope, don't know why it's not doing that, but usually it allows me to go get, there it is. Chars. So it shows you here source begin, source end, character destination, and destination begin. So what that means is where the original character begins, where it ends, where it's going to, and where to begin in the next one. So and then it iterates through with an enhanced for statement. Let's have a look. So I've also put in loads of new lines, so it's nice and spaced out. So here we have our regular string, which is printed here. I'm going to take that out because that's pretty straightforward. We already know this already. Or actually, for demonstration purposes, I'll just make it a comment. We know our string length is 5. So if we counted our number of within hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it just prints out 5. It returns an integer, so it's percentage D for our placeholder, which is really important. And then we have our for, which is going to be the length -1. So we have our character at, and it does it in reversal. So it prints it out in the reverse way. So we have our minus here. So it prints out hello, and then a new line, and then hello as well. So if I was to change this to ++, this is what's going to happen because it goes out of our bounds. So it starts at 0 because it's going from the other way. So if I go this way, and it will still, yeah. So we need to put in a percentage in here. So string length is 5, hello. So all you needed to do was change this operator to the other way, and this to -, and it prints it out as string length 5 character at hello. But if I do this, it's a little bit tricky. Wait for it until you see what I'm gonna do, because it's not nice. String length is 5 and hello, because it's not recognizing it. So this needs to be this way if we're going to go backwards through it. And now, perfect. So then we have our get chars. So we have our offset, our source begin, our source end, our destination, and our destination start point as well. And that goes through our enhanced for statement and prints it out on the screen as well as hello. And then we have a new line afterwards. So now we also have, with our strings, then we can also go into, I'm going to uncomment that so I can put it up on GitHub for you. And we also have our string compare. So there are two things that happens with the compare, and that's really important because a lot of people confuse the double equals to compare a string, because that's a comparison operator normally used for different things like numbers and stuff. But when you use it with the string, it's a different thing. So it's actually comparing it as an object as opposed to the contents of it. So we'll have a look at that now. So we have 4 strings here. Also, don't do this naming convention. This is only for demonstration purposes. It's not good naming conventions otherwise. So we have our string 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the difference between the 3 and the 4 is that it's a lowercase h and b for happy birthday. We have our printed print out. So as I said in the very first in the string constructors, that you can put everything in the one system.out or printf, which is better. So it just prints them out first. And then it uses what's called the equals dot equals method, which is actually one of the methods that are here. So if I go to source and override implement, and we have our equals, which is here, which is one of our select methods to override or implement as part of the object. So that's what we're using here. So when I click on it, you can see that it's a Boolean, compares the string to a specified object. This is true if and only if the argument is not null and is a string object that represents the same sequence of characters as this object. And this is where the dot equals for string is important, because this is the only time that we'd really need it to compare and to make sure that it is actually equals and not the double equals operator that we normally use. So we have our string 1 equals hello. We also use escape characters when we're using double quotation marks here. If I wasn't to use these, they're really, let's have a look and I'll show you all together, because it doesn't like it at all. There's going to be a syntax error, so it won't recognize. You can see straight away that it doesn't like it. So these escape characters here allow us to use double quotation marks, and this won't appear on screen. It's just within the program to say that I'm going to use a quotation mark, but it's not the start and end of our actual quotation marks that we're using to represent the sequence of characters in the string. So that's actually for, you can use escape characters for question marks and special characters as well. So string 1 equals hello, and then we have, this is not the same object, that's the difference, that the comparison operator, so the double equals, is comparing whether it's the same object but not the same contents within that string. Then there's also a method called equalsIgnoreCase, which we saw just there in the documentation, and you can pass through what you want to compare string 3 to string 4 and print it out. It's a simple if statement. Also, then we have our compareTo, and you can use string 1 dot compareTo, and that will print it out. And then we have our region matches, which have multiple different constructors. So here we have our 0 string 4 0 5, but here we have true 0 string 4 0 5. So it's overloaded methods. So if I go here to our documentation and look for region matches, and it shows here int t offset string other int o offset int length. So t is negative, o offset is negative, is greater than the length of the string object. O offset plus length is greater than the length of the other object. And you can see basically that there's different ways to use it. So tested two string regions are equal. Is compared to the substring of the argument other, and then the result is true if the substrings represent identical character sequences. So it checks the contents as well. Region matches then, and this returns the Boolean. This also returns a Boolean, so just a true or false. And this is true to ignore case. And that's what we're doing when we ignore it. So it's just another method that's used within it, within region matches. So we only have, we also have the compareTo ignore case and compareTo that we just had a look at there as well. So let's go back to our program and press play. So string 1 is hello. String 2 is goodbye. So this is just our printed out statement at the top, which I've tabbed across a little bit, which yeah, we can comment that out. Double. So also the better way to do it, multiple line commentation. And now if I run it again, because it's just taking up a lot of the console. So string 1 does not equal hello. So here we have string 1 does not equal hello. So if I have a look here, I've written hello as lowercase h. So if I change this to an uppercase h and look at it again, string 1 equals hello. So this is case sensitive. Should be written. This is case sensitive, so it has to be exact when it's looking at it. This one, string 1 is not the same object as hello. So string 1 is a different part of memory than what this is. So it's not going to be the same. So it's going to return this result. Then we have happy birthday equals happy birthday with case ignored, because we're using the equals ignore case. And then we go to string 1 dot compare string 2, first 5 characters of string 3. So I'll also put in a new line here just to clean it up better. String 1 dot compare to string 2 is there as well. And then we have our string 3 region matches, and I should also put in another make it better. So first 5 characters of they do not match, so I need to put in another here. And then we also have our region matches, which is true, which when we went to the documentation and looked up region matches, where we have our Boolean, so ignore case, then we use that here as well. So we say, yes, do ignore the case. So I've labeled it there within the comments. We'll run it again. There we go. Better. So for strings, then the method determines whether the contents of the 2 strings are identical, and that's with the string method equals. So they have to be identical. So that's a very that includes it being case sensitive, like I just demonstrated. So the hello has to be actually with a capital H. With the comparing strings with the so the method equals, firstly, it uses the lexicographical comparison. So it compares the integer of the Unicode values that represent each character, and that's where the Unicode comes in that I just spoke about here. So when we go to our Unicode chart, we have a capital letter A here. So in the Latin, so this, what it does is it compares this number here, 0 multiplied by 0041. And then when we go to our lowercase a, it's 61. So it's a different thing. So when you're using the equals, because they're two different things, then it will recognize it as two separate things, because in the background it's checking the Unicode operators. Then we have our comparing strings with the double equals, so our comparison operator, usually our equality operator. So string 1 for equality, then with the string literal hello. When primitive typed values are compared with the double equals, the result is true if both values are identical. But when we're referencing, when references are compared with the double equals, the result is true if both references refer to the same object in memory. So this is where we have our double equals, and that's why we've got written here same object, not the same object. And that's one of the biggest things that I've been asked in the last couple of weeks on the Java Programmers Facebook page and on the Programming for Beginners Facebook page that I'm part of, that I give feedback to for people for questions and stuff like that, and they're always asking the same questions, so it's important to recognize those two things first, and to compare the actual contents then of objects for equality. A method must be invoked, so the dot equals is the best one, and that comes from our very important override method that we just saw in source. So the regionMatches then, which is down here, also compare, but it's also important then to recognize that there are multiple ways to do that. So this is pretty much all the documentation that we've looked up online as well. So in the integrated development environment, in the Eclipse one that I'm using, it's useful to be able to see that as well. With compareTo, let's have a look. We don't have the percentage D here, and minus 31. So we have certain things that we can do within the compareTo that is there. So if we have S1, which is string 1 dot compared to string 2, and then we wanted to show that it's comparable to or that kind of stuff. So the class string implements an interface called comparable, which declares the method compareTo, and then the method compareTo returns 0 if the strings are equal, or a negative number if they're not equal. So if I'm just going to show you one more thing here with the string 1. So the method compareTo is also a lexicographical comparison, the same as our dot equals. So it compares the numeric values of the corresponding characters in each string. So that would be your Unicode basically in the background to compare each. So the method then returns 0. So if I make string 1 string 2, let's have a look and run it again, and it does match because it returns 0. So it returns an integer, so it has to be percentage D as well. And that's it for today. We're going to do value of and a few other things with strings in the next video. And yeah, see you tomorrow. Bye.